Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 31 of On the Road with AutoTrader, where we make car stuff simple for Canadians. My name is Jodi, and I'm the editor-in-chief of AutoTrader.
And I am Dan Alika. I am AutoTrader's road test editor.
So we obviously work at AutoTrader. We get so many questions about selling your car versus trading into a dealer. So we thought we would take this opportunity to kind of demystify all that and explain it in a really simple way. Also, how to sell your used car for top dollar, because we all know that when you're selling your used car, you want to get the most amount of dollars back in your pocket as possible. And we get a lot of questions about that. So let's start off this episode, Dan.
Yes.
What are some top tips on selling your used car for top dollar?
So there are some differences depending on the province or territory you live in. So just make sure that the paperwork is in order. Like in Ontario, for example, you do need a used vehicle information package. That's not the case in all provinces. So just kind of look at your regional or your local rules and regulations to make sure that you're following, because that's something that the seller has to provide. It's not something that the buyer does. So you need to go, or I think you can order that online now through the MTO.
What does that include?
It's basically just like the ownership history and some basic information about the vehicle to show the title and everything like that. So it's documentation within the ministry. Let's put it like that. But so just make sure, like if you're in Ontario, get that. Depending on where you live, if you need a similar package, I don't know. I can't speak for other provinces. When I lived in Alberta, I didn't need anything like that, but the buyer was from BC, and so I remember he had to get something through. I think it was through whatever the ICBC, like the insurance company there. So just make sure that you have all that in order. More basically, and guys, keep in mind, this isn't us just being like, oh, sell your car on AutoTrader. It is smart because it's free. B, there's just so many other listings, so you're kind of putting yourself in a good pool of potential cars that people are looking for and potential buyers. But just make sure to take good photos, clean the car first. There's nothing worse than when you look at a listing and you see somebody's left their receipts and change and trash in the car. It's such a turnoff.
But you think that's a really obvious thing for people.
Yeah.
Apparently it's not, because we search through the marketplace all the time just for fun stuff, and the kinds of pictures that people are taking are just like really bad sometimes. So like, do the bare minimum, the absolute bare minimum I suggest is run your car through a car wash and give it a good vacuum.
Absolutely.
And dust all of the surfaces. That's like the bare minimum of what you should be doing.
If you're a smoker, take it. I would recommend just going to get it detailed. Try to do your best to scrub that smell, but also don't hide the fact that you smoked in the car, because the person that's buying it is going to notice anyways. So just be forthright about everything. Same thing.
That includes all damage too. Just honesty is the best policy. You never want to surprise someone with something bad. So just if there's any rust or any damage or anything like that, just be really honest with it and document it in your pictures, because it will help.
Yeah, and so the photos, a good write-up helps. I mean, the funny ones are always good.
I love the one you wrote when you were selling your Miata.
I tried to block that from my memory.
I know, because it's very sad. It's like a bittersweet moment, but the way you wrote your listing was so beautiful.
Yeah, I tried to just make it appealing on that personal level, because that's, the type of car it was. My buddy wrote a funny one for his motorcycle that he had it listed for something like $80,000
for a motorcycle.
Well, but then like the first line is something about like willing to knock about $75,000 off the price. It's just something to get the person's attention, right? So you have something that kind of stands out, get them to click on it, but then good photos. So phones these days, the cameras are amazing. We recommend shooting in the shade, whether it's an overcast day. That's kind of the perfect conditions. Overcast day. get out there, take some photos. That way you don't get any hot spots on the car, or like the background isn't all blown out and the foreground is dark.
Yeah.
So just like make sure, do your best. If it's not a cloud in the sky, okay, fine. Go to a park, get some nice oak trees, park under there so you can take advantage of that, because it just shows the car in a consistent light. I think that's
it's better
the
to
key.
see the details that way too if there's
Yeah.
no like harsh sunlight on
Yeah.
it. But also, I know this also sounds really obvious, but like give your lens a little wipe before you start taking
Oh yeah,
pictures.
you like that tip.
People just forget it, and
Yeah.
then if you don't do it, it ends up like it looks like you took your photos with a potato. So
Yeah.
you don't want that.
Yeah.
The other thing I always recommend to people is keep your service records. And keep them organized, because if a buyer sees that you've taken good care, followed the service maintenance, they might be willing to pay extra for that peace of mind.
Yeah, that's what it all comes down to, right? I think like nobody necessarily goes through, unless you're talking classics or like a high performance
Right.
car. But yeah, just to see like a folder that's neatly organized. Also keep in mind, you can get a lot of those records through your dealer. That's the one thing that is nice about, getting your vehicle serviced at a dealer facility, is that you can get all those records pretty easily through them. It also means that a potential buyer can trace all of that stuff back. Same thing if there's any recall notices, if you haven't gotten them taken care of, it's just one more step. Keep in mind, any recall work, it's free of charge. It's not a bad idea to get it taken care of. And
Just so the next person won't have to do it.
Well, yeah, exactly. So it's kind of value added for them. It's like, why not do that, kind of take that hassle out? And even a mutual friend of ours, Derek McNaughton, he bought an old Toyota Land Cruiser, whatever,
Cool.
like from the 80s. And he discovered that there was a recall out on like, I think it was like the brake lines or something like that, the work had never been completed.
It was recalled in the 80s?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And he got that work done. This was only like a couple years
Yeah.
ago. So it's like, but anyways, any of that sort of stuff, those if it's never been addressed, that work is available again through your dealer. You can figure all that stuff out. It's not a bad idea just to take care of all of that, so that a potential buyer knows that you've kind of done the job. You're selling that peace of mind.
It's the same thing with safety test, right? Is that different from province to province?
Yes, but that's pretty standard. So a safety or a certification, it's anywhere. It's like emissions testing. That used to be a thing that varied. That doesn't exist in most places nowadays. But yeah, safety, like a vehicle has to pass a safety inspection.
Yeah, and I would just pay to do that ahead of time, so that the potential buyer doesn't have to pay to do it.
Yeah, and so for those of you out there who are on the flip side, who are shopping for a new vehicle, so what you're going to look for, a listing that says that the vehicle is being sold as is, that is a person's way of saying that they haven't done the safety. Again, that peace of mind that comes with it, it's not a guarantee, but what it means is that a licensed mechanic has gone through, inspected that vehicle, and has put their signature on it. So let's just say that you buy the car and you find out that there's a hole in the floor. You can look at that safety inspection certificate and see who the mechanic was who did the inspection, and that's who you can kind of take up your issue with. So yeah, like Jodi said, make sure, that's how I have sold cars in the past.
And there is they expire after a certain amount of time,
I think
right?
in Ontario, I believe it's only like 30 or 45 days.
Right.
So kind of do that in a timely manner. The other way you can do it, if you're worried, I mean, right now the market's pretty hot. So if you're posting a vehicle for sale, like, chances are you're going to get some bites pretty quick. If you're confident that the vehicle is going to pass a safety inspection, or you don't mind paying the money should there be an issue, you can always post it as like selling certified. Don't necessarily get the inspection done right away, because if the car sits on the market for a while, you're going to have to go spend that whatever $150 again. So it's not a bad idea to wait. But if you don't know and you want the answer beforehand, pay for it and take the gamble. And and some mechanics are pretty good about, like knowing if they know you, like, okay, well, the vehicle hasn't changed. They're not going to charge you for the full safety inspection. But either way, think about it like this. Even if you're selling a car, let's say, I mean, the old beaters don't necessarily exist anymore, but let's just say you're selling something for only a couple grand. To spend even $300 because you have to get the safety done twice, in the grand scheme of things, it's worth it. If you want to sell it as is, okay, that's fine. Buyer beware. And I don't mean that, the seller is a shifty person. It just means you could buy something and find out, oh, it needs a full brake overhaul.
Yeah.
Right? And that's an expensive
Yeah, and I mean, some
fix.
people are willing to take that risk.
Yeah.
If you're really handy and you can rent yourself, that might not be a big deal. But for a potential buyer, that might turn them off completely. So you just have to be really honest about stuff.
And the bigger one for me with the safety, it's, stuff like that. There's always going to be parts that, those are what I term like consumables, right? So that's fine. Wear and tear, brakes, suspension, that sort of stuff. The bigger thing that the safety is going to look for that you might not be able to notice yourself are structural flaws, holes in the vehicle. The other thing to look at is the ownership, and just make sure that you're buying, like, it's fine to buy what's termed a salvage record, which means like the vehicle has been. So when you look at the ownership, again, in Ontario, it'll have, like the type, and if it says like a salvage, it means the vehicle was in a crash and it's been repaired. A salvage title, whatever, it's not the end of the world because it's allowed to be on the road. But again, for peace of mind, it might not be what you're looking for. So what you want to look for, if it says like brand none, that means like there's no record on file of anything with the title being salvaged, wrecked, whatever.
Right. And then if you do see that it has been salvaged, usually they'll be selling it for a bit of a discount because they know they won't be able to
You'd
move
hope
it at a
so.
higher price. But who knows? These days,
Yeah.
pricing is crazy. We went over that in a previous episode.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's pretty much it for like getting top dollar. It's pretty like
Totally.
standard stuff.
Yeah.
If you took good care of your car and you have records, people will pay extra for that. Just take care of your stuff.
Yeah.
And it'll take care of you.
The other thing to consider, and it's, especially if you're selling a second vehicle or like a surplus vehicle like I did with my Miata, it's not, it doesn't necessarily apply. But if you're upgrading your vehicle, the trade-in versus selling privately is always something that I, get questions about.
Same.
Friends talk to me about this all the time. So, let's say, I don't know, you're replacing a 10-year-old vehicle. Should you trade that in to the dealership or sell it privately once you buy your new vehicle?
So let's talk about the pros and cons of both. So you could sell your car privately at retail value. You'll get more money in your own pocket that way.
I don't want to,
But
no guarantees.
There's no guarantees, but so the difference is when you're trading in versus selling it privately, you're doing all the work. You're doing all the legwork. You're taking all the pictures. You're listing it. And you have to deal with all of the inquiries that come in, all the questions, all the people that want to come see it. So it might take you longer to sell it, but at the end of the day, you might get more money back in your pocket. So it's a chance you can take.
Yeah, whereas like a dealer, obviously, they want their end. So there's going to be a margin there. So let's say, again, just a hypothetical. If the vehicle is worth $10,000, right? It's rare that a dealer would give you that 10 grand.
Yeah, because they have to buy your vehicle at wholesale price. Because
Well, they don't have to. It's just like what they want is the biggest margin possible.
Yeah,
right?
so they have to make money on your car, so they have to sell it to someone else, and so they have to leave enough margin there, and so. But that means that they're doing all the work, right? So
Exactly.
You don't have to take care of the tire kickers and all the questions and stuff. So you're really just paying them for that convenience.
Yeah. The other thing to consider nowadays, especially because of just the craziness of prices and a lack of inventory, is let's say you're coming off lease. It's not a crazy idea to go to your dealer or a used dealer and gauge their interest in buying the vehicle from you. So they can't do that outright, but what they can do is, so they'll look at the value, because the way that leasing works is you're paying for, your time with the vehicle. So if it's a 2-year lease, and you figure you're going to rack up 12,000 kilometers a year, so you're going to pay for the MSRP less the residual value, so what the retained value is. So let's say it's a $30,000 vehicle and it's figured to be worth $22,000. So what you're paying for over that 2-year term, as long as you don't exceed the mileage and all that stuff, is the $8,000, right? But if that, because of the market and how crazy it was, or it has been, if the vehicle is actually worth more than that now, it's, instead of just, turning in your lease, it's not worth inquiring with your dealer to see, because if it's now worth, let's say, $26,000 or even $30,000, because there's been a lot of that lately where the vehicles have been worth roughly the same as MSRP after a couple years, they will buy that vehicle from you. So what they'll do is they will cut you a check for the value of that vehicle that they're willing to pay, which is more than you would. So let's say your buyout again is $22,000 and they're willing to give you $24,000. You can pocket $2,000 just by trading that vehicle into that leased vehicle in. So, make sure that you're looking out for yourself. Again, doing trade-in on an owned vehicle, it is way more convenient.
It is so convenient. There's a lot of benefits to doing that, because you're dealing with one person and they bundle all of that transaction into a single transaction. So it's a lot less of a headache. And then there's also tax benefits too. So if you're trading in your owned vehicle for a new one, like if you're upgrading, that will reduce the amount of tax you have to pay on your new vehicle.
Yeah.
And so you might end up saving like $1,500 maybe.
Hundreds or even thousands depending on the price. It is nice to do it that way. The other one is the tire kickers.
Yeah.
And what your, kind of, let's say like the risk assessment of letting someone come drive your personal car. When I sold my Miata, the guy who bought it from me was amazing. And one of the things, so I was like ready and willing for him to take it for a test drive. And he was like, no, I don't want to drive it yet because I don't have like the cash on me, which I thought was like a really noble approach to test driving, where he wanted to make sure that he had like the envelope of cash in case he crashed it.
Right.
That way he could, pay me for his mistake. Because that is one of those things, like the liability of letting a stranger drive your car, who may or may not be interested. That's the other thing, is gauging serious interest versus people that are just coming to have some fun.
Yeah.
And so again, the trade-in takes all of that stress out of it, especially if you have like a performance car or a manual. The last thing you want to do is let somebody with no experience driving manual take your manual transmission car out for a spin.
So painful.
and they don't know what they're doing, and then they could cause damage that you have to actually pay out of pocket. You can't hold that person responsible. If you've willingly given them the key, and remember that crazy story, I don't know, it was last year sometime, about those guys that drove that Audi through
the
mall just north of Toronto, and the car was stolen from the Montreal area, and the insurance company, I don't know what the verdict was in the end, but the insurance company wasn't going to cover it because the car was listed for sale, and she willingly let the eventual thief drive, because he showed up like, hey, I'm just here to test drive this car, and then he like kicked her out of the car and took off.
Yeah,
and the
that's
insurance
a crazy
company
story.
was like, now obviously I'm not trying to scare you guys out there, and like, that's obviously 1 in a million, but those are those risks you take with a test drive, and the liability is yours,
Yeah.
not the other
So
person's.
for me, the convenience of just trading it into a dealer is totally worth it because I don't have the time or the energy to be dealing with people, all those questions that come in, right?
Yeah.
But if you have the time and the energy, it could be a really good
Space
option
is
for
another
you.
one, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is something that I've talked with people about. If you've got a driveway or a garage at home, sure, that's fine. Buy a new car, park your other one outside, put a sale for sale sign in the window, post it on AutoTrader, and wait it out. But like, if you live in a, like for you, for example, you have one parking
Yeah.
spot in your building.
I'd have to get rid of it right
You
away.
have to get rid of it because you can't, you don't
Yeah.
have the space, especially if you don't know. It's one thing if it's like you've got someone lined up and, you know, so you could put it in visitors for a couple nights. But if you're posting it for sale and just like waiting for the right offer to come in, you don't have the space to do that. And I think a lot of people are in that position. Or even if you do have a driveway, multi-car household, you don't want to be jockeying cars all the time. What's your time and energy worth?
Yeah.
And if it's only going to make you an extra, even nowadays, if it's only like a couple grand, you know, I'd seriously consider just trading it in and you know, kind of,
Just because it's so convenient.
just wash your hands of it and move on, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, I know we work at AutoTrader, so we're always trying to pump it up, but there's a really good tool on there where it's called like What's My Car Worth? So you can just like plug in all the details and it will give you like a realistic estimate based on a whole bunch of fancy algorithms about how much you should be asking privately versus how much you might be willing to let it go to a dealer for. And so it's nice to have that tool.
Yes.
I've used that tool a lot. There's like also no obligation. Like you just type in your information. I think it's really easy.
The other thing about that is like, be realistic. You know, obviously nowadays it's tough because prices are, you know, higher than they were pre-pandemic. But yeah, try to look at what else is out there. Look at comparables before you price your vehicle. Don't undersell it. Don't overprice it. Be realistic. And then the flip side of it is if you're a buyer, like when I remember posting the Miata, and I don't remember how much I posted it for, but the first message I got was some guy offering me like $6,000 less than I had it listed
That's
for.
just
And
insulting.
I was like,
I wouldn't even respond to that.
I didn't, but I laughed, right? And lowballers, I always love the people that post and then they're like, you know, like tell lowballers to take a hike and not even bother. And it's true, but it's like, come on, man. Like, what do you think? Somebody posted something and they're really going to take like 50% less. Oh yeah, I was waiting for this offer. Like, you're the person.
No, especially because the Miata is like an in-demand. Like everyone loves it.
Yeah.
No one's gonna let it go for less than what it's
I felt like
worth.
messaging that guy back after I sold it to be like, hey, guess what, man? I sold it for my list price.
Yeah.
But anyways.
Yeah, I don't know what those people are up to.
I just wish, just be realistic on both ends of the deal. Like, yes, you know, if you're buying a vehicle, do your thing, try to get a deal, but, you know, be reasonable, especially when you're dealing with a private sale.
Yeah.
I don't think it's right to be.
There was one other tip that I forgot.
Okay.
If you're selling your used vehicle to get top dollar, if you've made any upgrades or if it comes with tires or if you've done anything special to it or you got upgrades when you purchased it, definitely add that to the listing because that, you know, other people might be interested in that too.
That's the other side. It's like, you know, sometimes it might be worth your time and energy. Let's say you have like a fairly new set of winter tires on a dedicated set of rims and it's a fairly standard, you know, let's say it's something like a Honda CRV. So it's like popular. The bolt pattern is, you know, pretty widespread. You know, you might want to keep those and sell them privately if somebody isn't willing to pay that kind of premium, for lack of a better term, for those extras, and you've got space in your basement or your garage to keep the tires until next fall. You know, it might be worth it. But again, I look at a lot of this stuff and go like, what, you know, why not just kind of get on with it?
It's just so much
Move
more
on with your life.
convenient. And
Yeah.
if I was a buyer, I'd be like, oh, it comes with everything. That's great. One less
Exactly.
thing for me to do.
The other thing, and this is like a Justin Pritchard, one of our contributors, good guy. He writes these. They're really valuable. You can find them on autotrader.ca/editorial where they're used vehicle reviews. So Justin's got a lot of experience and does a lot of research on these to talk about vehicles that are generally like, you know, within, let's say, 4 or 5 years old. and one of his major points that I am a big proponent of as well is like, be careful with performance upgrades. So yes, as a seller, you should list them. You shouldn't, hide them, because they can add value, especially if it's stuff like wheels. That's a big one. Winter tires being extra, that's great. If you're looking at a vehicle and it's been tuned, it's been modified, it's been chipped, that's the kind of stuff that I would proceed with caution, because you never know how that system is going to actually, perform with the OEM systems,
Right.
As well as how the person, generally speaking, people that have modified their vehicles for improved performance, drive them pretty hard.
Yeah, and
So-
also you might want to ask who it was done by. Like, did you do it in your
Yeah.
garage, or did like a professional do it?
Yes,
Those are the kinds
absolutely.
of questions you might want to ask when dealing with performance cars specifically.
Yeah.
With performance cars, there's like a whole other list of things you should be looking for. So
Yes.
maybe we should do a different episode about
Yeah,
that.
that's the other thing. Regardless, one thing that isn't a terrible idea, especially when you're talking, kind of high dollar used, for $150 or whatever, to take the vehicle to your dealer, or your mechanic,
trusted
sorry.
mechanic.
Yeah, and have them, or just a local one if you're buying out of town, to have them give it a once over so that they can give you kind of a diagnosis and let you know what they think of the vehicle. Again, it's peace of mind. If the seller is not okay with you doing that, that's a bit of a red flag.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, honesty is the best policy. So if they
Yeah.
have nothing to hide, then why wouldn't they let you do that, right?
So that's not a terrible way to kind of give yourself that extra peace of mind. Just take it in. Again, if it's out of town, you can go to any like locally, like highly reviewed mechanic, or even a place like a Canadian Tire,
Yeah.
or like a Midas, a chain that you
Just to
can
get a
go
second
and
opinion.
get that second opinion for what it's worth, to pay for that. Especially if you're paying $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 for a used vehicle, I wouldn't, be opposed to doing that.
Yeah, it's a small investment for
Yes.
some extra peace of mind, which is
Totally.
always a smart thing to do. So if any of you have questions about this process, please email us at expert@trader.ca. Before we do our Ask an Expert segment for this episode, here's a message from our overlords. Save time and money by using AutoTrader, Canada's most trusted place to buy and sell new and used cars. AutoTrader has the most cars, and one of the best features is price badging, so you can feel more confident that you're getting a good deal. So today's Ask an Expert question is one that we get a lot, and it's something you talk about in almost every review that you do.
Really?
Yeah. So you often say that the destination fee isn't negotiable.
Oh, yes.
Why is this? And do you need to pay this fee if you're buying a used car?
Okay.
Great question.
That is a great question. So I guess the whole thing really why is it separate? I don't know. It really shouldn't be. I've said this in the past. It's like the only consumer good that you can buy in Canada where you have to pay to get it to the store you're buying it from.
They should just bundle it into the price.
Like
That's what I've
Genesis
always
does
been
that,
saying.
and people respond really well. And there is a certain amount of like, you've been duped, because it's not, Genesis isn't covering that cost. Genesis is still passing that down to the buyer. It's just bulked into the sticker price. There is some transparency of seeing it as a separate line item, but yes, you do have to pay it on a new vehicle. If it's pre-owned, including a demo. So once it's been registered, don't let that be passed along to you. If you go to buy, even if it's only like a 6-month-old demo that the dealer manager has been driving, if they try to pass that destination fee along to you, either tell them no or walk out the door, because that is not on you, that is the first person that registered the vehicle is paying for the destination and PDI, which is the pre-delivery inspection. Generally, it's a couple grand. It's not negotiable because, again, just like if you walked into an electronics store to buy a TV, they're not going to foot the bill for getting that TV to the store. You got to pay to buy it from your local dealer. It's a couple grand. Yeah, it sucks. It's more expensive now than it's ever been because of insurance and transportation costs. Gas is expensive, all of that stuff. But yeah, I think that pretty much covers it, right?
Yeah, so it's not negotiable. You'll always have to pay it on a new vehicle.
Yeah.
And you do not need to pay it if you are buying a used car.
Yeah. So again, even if it's a pre-owned demo that's, only got a few thousand kilometers on the odometer or whatever, once it's been registered, that should not be passed along to the next buyer.
Got it. Thank you so much for your question. If anyone has any car-related questions or personal questions that you would like to ask Dan or I, you can email expert@trader.ca. So thank you for joining us on this episode. Drive safe out there, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.